Part 1. The Winter Invitation. The arrival of Kevin. Snow never lies, Kevin once said. But people? They hide corpses behind smiles. The first flurries had begun to settle on the winding country roads of Larkridge Valley, cloaking the old English woods in a hush so deep it could have buried a scream. But inside the dark green Bentley coasting toward Stonehill Manor, there was no silence. There was thought, focus, memory. Detective Kevin Whitmore had taken this road once before, years ago, chasing shadows and a murderer into the very belly of this wintry wilderness. Now the case was long buried, but the snow was the same, blinding white, sharp as truth, and silent as death. Stonehill Manor stood like a fossil in time, an Edwardian fortress with moss-covered stone walls and turreted towers reaching into the colorless sky. It looked like the kind of place where secrets were kept under lock and key, and where something waited behind every closed door. Kevin stepped out of the car, coat whipping in the wind. The air stung like needles, bitter and biting. From the wrought iron gate to the heavy oak doors, everything about the manor reeked of power, money, and rot. Thompson, the old family butler, opened the door before Kevin knocked. "Mr. Whitmore," he said with a soft, respectful nod. "The master spoke of you. Welcome to Stonehill." "Still smells like cigar smoke and secrets," Kevin replied with a half smile, brushing snow off his shoulders. "I'm here just for the tea. No corpses this time, I hope." Thompson's eyes twitched slightly. "We shall see, sir." The interior hadn't changed in decades. Grand staircase, mahogany banisters, oil paintings of grim-faced ancestors staring down from every wall. The hearth in the drawing room crackled weakly, failing to warm the long shadows pooling in every corner. "How is the old man?" Kevin asked, glancing toward the chandelier above. A spider's web clung to one of the crystal arms, unseen, undisturbed. "Alive," Thompson said, "and watching." They sat near the fire, the butler pouring dark Earl Grey into delicate china. Kevin didn't sip. His fingers tapped the cup like a metronome of suspicion. "So," he said slowly, "why me?" Thompson folded his hands. "Because the family is gathering, all of them, first time in over a decade." Kevin raised an eyebrow. "And Bernard Stonehill wants a detective present for tea and carols?" He didn't say that, but he had a list. "And you were on it." Kevin's eyes narrowed. Stonehill. The patriarch. The magnate. A man with wealth so deep it could drown a nation, and sins so old they had started to grow mold. If he was summoning his estranged sons, forgotten lovers, and long-lost blood, then something was stirring. And Kevin could already hear it breathing beneath the floorboards. Outside, the snow thickened. A storm was coming, and someone, Kevin could feel it, wasn't going to survive this Christmas. The son's return. Arthur arrived first. The Bentley had barely cooled on the gravel path before a second car, sleek, black, government-issued, pulled in behind it. Arthur Stonehill stepped out stiffly, straightening the lapels of his charcoal coat as if it were military armor. He looked exactly like a man who had been holding his breath for 20 years. His eyes scanned the manor, then flicked to Kevin, standing beneath the archway. "Whitmore," he said flatly. "Still snooping around dead men's business?" Kevin smirked. "Only the ones who haven't died yet." Arthur didn't smile. He had his father's jaw, square and judgmental, and his mother's silence, weaponized after decades of enduring. As they entered the foyer, Thompson gave Arthur a slight bow. "Your room is prepared, sir. Just as before." Arthur's eyes narrowed. "That's impossible. Nothing is just as before. 2 hours later, Mason arrived, with a personal driver, 3 pieces of luggage, and an attitude that could split granite. The rising political star, sharp as a scalpel, spoke like every word was weighed in gold. "Lovely, this place," Mason muttered as he walked through the great hall. "Like time died here and forgot to rot." He ignored Arthur. The brothers exchanged glances, but not greetings. "Where is the old man?" Mason asked Thompson. "In his study, watching." "Of course he is," Mason sneered, probably counting how many disappointments he summoned home. Derek came just before sunset. He didn't have a car. He walked, from the village, through snow and fog and wind. His coat was too thin, his shoes soaked, and his eyes— those were the eyes of someone who never came back from where he went. He hugged Thompson like an old friend. The butler, though startled, hugged him back. "Is he really dying this time?" Derek asked softly. "I wouldn't assume so, sir. He never does. Only others." Kevin watched from the second-floor landing as Derek disappeared into the parlor, clutching a worn leather journal to his chest like a child would a rabbit's foot. Then came Henry. No one expected him, not even Thompson. He didn't send a letter, didn't call, he just showed up. At the edge of the woods, as if the trees themselves had spat him out. His coat was old, boots caked in dried mud, and he had a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, like a veteran of some forgotten war. Kevin spotted him first. Henry lit a cigarette outside, squinting at the manor like it was an enemy fortification. "You're not dead yet?" he asked Kevin casually. "Still warming up?" Kevin replied. "Then I'm early." Henry walked in without knocking, past Thompson, past Arthur and Mason, glaring in disbelief. He didn't say hello. He just looked around, smirked, and muttered, "Still stinks of guilt." By nightfall, the 4 sons were under one roof again, for the first time in 17 years. They didn't sit together. They didn't speak, but they didn't need to. The silence in the drawing room was louder than gunfire. The unexpected guests. It was just past 6 p.m. when the taxi arrived. No one in the family had mentioned expecting more visitors, but the headlights cut through the snowfall like a warning, and when the door opened, silence spread through the house like a ripple. She stepped out first. She couldn't have been older than 25. Thick, dark curls framed a face too still, too perfect. A red wool coat hugged her waist. Snowflakes clung to her eyelashes, but didn't melt. Her heels crunched softly on the gravel as she approached the manor, her eyes drinking in every window, every shadow, as though this place was both memory and myth. Behind her, a man emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, mid-30s, with sun-worn skin, a strong jaw, and an alertness that didn't match the calm of his steps. He paid the driver, then adjusted the leather strap of a canvas bag over his shoulder and followed the woman toward the door. Kevin was the one who opened it before Thompson could. "You're early," he said. Not to be polite, just to see how they'd react. The woman smiled faintly. "We were told dinner would be at 7, she said. Her accent was unmistakable. Spain, or something close. The man extended his hand. "Lucas Reed, I believe Mr. Bernard Stonehill is expecting us." Kevin shook it. "And you are?" "Isabel de Torres." She hesitated. "Granddaughter to Bernard Stonehill." Their arrival disrupted everything. In the drawing room, the brothers stopped pretending not to notice one another. Arthur frowned. Mason rolled his eyes. Derek sat up straight for the first time. And Henry. Henry stared at Isabel as if she'd been summoned from one of his dreams or his nightmares. Thompson cleared his throat. Mr. Stonehill instructed that both guests be given rooms in the east wing. Arthur stepped forward. "Why are they here?" Lucas replied. "That's a question best asked to your father. If he still qualifies for that title," Henry muttered. Kevin watched the room closely. One sentence had tilted the energy sideways. Isabel, with her porcelain features and quiet poise, seemed more like an actress than a relative. But there was something under the surface, a tension behind her eyes, as if this house held ghosts only she could see. Lucas, by contrast, had the stillness of a soldier. He didn't fidget, didn't blink too much. When he looked at Kevin, it was clear he didn't underestimate anyone, not even the butler. "You're the detective," Lucas said casually. Kevin gave a half smile. "And you're not here for the weather." Dinner wasn't served yet, but the table was already full of silence, suspicion, and sharp glances. Kevin sat back in the parlor, watching Isabel warm her hands near the fire. He studied her like a puzzle. "You've never met Mr. Stonehill before, have you?" he asked. She turned her gaze to him slowly. "No," she said, "but I've waited my whole life to." And for a split second, Kevin saw something in her expression. It wasn't joy. It was purpose. It cracks in the foundation. Later that night, the manor groaned under the weight of silence. Wind scraped along the windows like fingernails on glass. Somewhere in the east wing, a door creaked open, then closed. Footsteps wandered the upper floor, too light to be a man, too hesitant to be just a servant. Kevin didn't sleep. He never did on nights like these. He found Thompson in the library, placing firewood into the hearth with deliberate care. The old butler's hands moved like they remembered too much. "You served this family long?" Kevin asked, voice low. 43 years. Thompson straightened. "I've watched these walls swallow more things than they ever returned." Kevin stepped toward the bookshelves, running his fingers over the cracked spines of novels never read. "Tell me about Derek's mother." Thompson froze, only for a second. "Eleanor?" he said softly. "She was too good for this house, too soft, too real." Kevin nodded. "She died young." "She drowned. In the bathtub. Slipped," they said. He paused. "But grief can kill without leaving bruises." Kevin turned. "What about Bernard?" "He didn't cry. He married again within a year. The sons never forgave him. Especially Derek. That boy still dreams in her voice." Down the hall, Derek sat alone in the music room, touching keys on an old upright piano, but never playing a full chord. His eyes were locked on a framed photograph beside the window. It was of his mother, Eleanor, smiling in a sunlit garden, a rare thing in this house. Kevin entered quietly. "She was beautiful," he said. Derek didn't look up. "She didn't belong here." "But you do?" Derek laughed, bitter and soft. "I belong nowhere. That's why I stayed." He ran a finger along the photo's edge. "Father never hit her, never screamed, but silence is cruelty when it lasts long enough." He watched her fall apart and did nothing. Kevin studied the man's face, sunken cheeks, tired eyes, lips that trembled not from cold but from memory. "Do you think he brought you all here to make peace?" "No," Derek whispered. "He brought us here to remind us he still controls everything, even the end." Later, in the dining room, Arthur stood staring at the portrait of Bernard in his youth, a man in military uniform, medals heavy on his chest, his face sharp as a blade. Kevin joined him. "He ever tell you he loved you?" Kevin asked. Arthur scoffed. He told me I owed him. That's not the same. They stood in silence. Why are you really here, Arthur? The eldest son didn't answer right away. Then, finally, to make sure he doesn't leave everything to strangers. And across the hall, in the guest corridor, Isabel stood in front of a closed door. Bernard's study. She raised her hand, hovered over the doorknob, but didn't turn it. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished brass. Tomorrow, she whispered. Everything changes tomorrow. And behind her, unseen in the shadowed hallway, someone watched her, breathing slow, unblinking. The master of the house. They gathered in the parlor at 8:30, not by invitation, by instinct. The air had thickened, like something was about to begin, or end. The fire cracked, but offered no warmth. The chandelier above flickered slightly, as if it too were unsure whether to stay. Then came the sound. A slow, deliberate shuffle, shoes against wood, a cane tapping in time. The door creaked open, and Bernard Stonehill stepped into the room. Old age had gripped him, but hadn't broken him. His body was hunched, yes, bones thinner, skin drawn tight like wax over stone. But his eyes were sharp, icy, alive. He paused just inside the doorway, letting the tension soak into his skin like perfume. Well, he rasped. Look what the snow dragged in. No one laughed. Arthur stood first, almost out of reflex. Mason remained seated. Derek avoided his gaze. Henry leaned back in his chair, smirking. Isabel stood politely near the fireplace, Lucas at her side, unreadable. Bernard took his time reaching the armchair at the head of the room. Every step was a statement. It's good to see you all again, he said, settling into the chair. Well, most of you. No one asked who he meant. They all assumed it was them. Do you know why I called you back? Bernard asked. Silence. It's not because I'm dying. I'm not. Not yet. Shame, Mason muttered under his breath. Bernard's eyes snapped to him, lightning behind them, but he only smiled. I called you here because I've been doing some thinking. He looked around the room. About blood, about legacy, about what survives when a man doesn't. He gestured toward Isabel. This young lady may be the only one of you who understands that. You see, she came not for money, not for apologies, but for truth. Isabel flinched slightly, but said nothing. Tomorrow, Bernard continued, we will sit down. Like a family. We'll eat, we'll drink, and I will read something I haven't shown anyone yet. He tapped his cane twice on the floor. A new will. That did it. Arthur's shoulders tensed. Mason exhaled slowly through his nose. Derek swallowed hard. Henry's smirk widened. Bernard leaned back in his chair. Until then, he said, enjoy the evening. Catch up. Smile even. This is, after all, a celebration. Of what? Arthur asked bitterly. Bernard's grin deepened. Of me. Kevin stood in the doorway, watching. He didn't speak, didn't move, but Bernard's eyes found him anyway. Mr. Whitmore, he said, you're a man who enjoys puzzles. Some, Kevin replied. But not the ones with missing pieces. Good, Bernard said. Because this one, you'll need every piece you can get. A dinner with knives. The dining room was dressed for celebration. Candles flickered from a silver candelabra. A chandelier, too clean to be old, cast golden light across a table that could seat 20. Pine garlands lined the windows. Silverware gleamed like teeth. But no one was smiling. The family took their seats slowly, each choosing distance over warmth. Kevin stood near the sideboard, quietly observing, a glass of untouched wine in hand. Bernard sat at the head, of course. Isabel was placed to his right. The sons arranged like reluctant chess pieces. Arthur to the left, Mason next to him, then Derek across from Henry, like someone was daring them to talk. No one did. The only sound was the gentle clink of cutlery on porcelain. Even the fire crackled more quietly tonight, as if it, too, sensed the storm brewing between courses. Arthur cut his roast lamb with surgical precision. "I didn't realize we were celebrating anything," he said finally. Bernard sipped his wine. "Your presence is celebration enough." Then perhaps we should have declined. Mason leaned back, swirling his glass. "I'm just curious how you found her," he said, nodding toward Isabel. "We were always under the impression there were no grandchildren." "Perhaps you weren't paying attention," Bernard replied coolly. "Or perhaps you invented one." Isabel's face didn't change, but her fingers tightened around her fork. "I'm not a fiction," she said softly. "Then where have you been all these years?" Mason pressed. "No postcards? No birthday calls? Where were any of you?" She shot back, surprising even herself. The table went still. Derek broke the silence, voice low but cutting. "We all stayed away for a reason." "Cowards," Henry said, smirking. "The lot of you." Arthur snapped. "You're one to talk." "You vanished." "No, I was banished," Henry corrected. "There's a difference." "For stealing." "From a man who stole his own children's futures? Please." Kevin's gaze moved from one face to the next, watching the veneer peel back. Isabel tried to redirect. "I didn't come for inheritance." "Of course you didn't," Mason said dryly. "Pretty girls never lie." Bernard set his glass down hard. "Enough." His voice wasn't loud, but it was final. Everyone froze. He looked at them like a disappointed god. "This house has lived longer than all of you combined, and it will outlive your egos. Sit, eat, and remember, every single one of you is here because I allowed it." Silence returned like a sheet of ice. Derek poked at his food. Mason rolled his eyes. Henry smirked into his wine. Kevin leaned against the mantel, arms crossed, and whispered more to himself than anyone else. "This isn't dinner. It's bait." Later, as plates were cleared, Bernard raised a final toast. "To family," he said. "The ones who came back. The ones who can still change what's written." No one clinked glasses. Isabel looked at her wine, but didn't drink. Arthur's jaw was locked. Henry raised his glass, but drank nothing. Kevin's eyes narrowed. Something had shifted. The air was wrong. Someone was already planning what came next. The silence after knives. The corridors of Stonehill Manor creaked under the weight of unspoken things. Dinner had ended, plates cleared, wine glasses emptied. But no one lingered. One by one, the family disappeared behind their bedroom doors, like actors exiting a stage they never wanted to be on. The air smelled of ash and aged anger. Kevin remained in the hallway, arms folded, listening, not for footsteps, but for hesitation. Arthur's room was the closest to the stairs, neat, orderly, just like him. He stood by the window, still in his suit, staring out into the snow. His breath fogged the glass. Behind him, the fire crackled low, uninviting. "He's gonna change it all," he whispered. "Throw everything to some stranger, a girl we've never met." His jaw clenched. "I gave up my life for this family. Never married, never left. I served the Empire, then came back to serve him. And for what?" He looked down at his own hands. "If he dies tomorrow, I have nothing." Down the hall, Mason scrolled through news on his phone, the screen lighting his face in cold blue. "One scandal," he muttered. "One inheritance fight, and I'm off the front bench." He paced. This house isn't a home. It's leverage, and I need it more than anyone. He poured himself another glass of scotch. This one didn't tremble in his hand. "He won't sign that will. I'll make sure of it." Derek sat in the window alcove of his dim room, clutching his journal to his chest like armor. He hadn't lit the fireplace. Instead, he let the cold press into him, a reminder that he could still feel something. Anything. "You watched her die," he said aloud, voice trembling. "You let her fade." He opened the journal, flipped to a page where the ink had bled from tears long dried. A poem stared back at him, a poem about drowning. "You don't deserve peace," he said, eyes sharp now. "You deserve to feel her death." Henry, in contrast, lounged shirtless by his fireplace, the glow flickering across the scars on his back, some from war, some not. He smoked with one hand, flipped a coin with the other. "Funny how time doesn't heal anything," he muttered. "You'd think, after all these years, I'd stop caring, but no. Every time I hear his voice, I'm 14 again, in that study, with him shouting, with my bag at the door." He flicked ash into the fire. "He thought he buried me, but I was learning how to dig." He smiled, but it wasn't kind. Isabel stood in front of her mirror, brushing her hair in silence. She wasn't smiling either. Her reflection looked too calm, too controlled. "Don't let them see your fear," she whispered. She opened her suitcase, reached beneath the lining, and took out a small velvet pouch. Inside, a rosary, a photograph of a woman with sad eyes, and a day lie la dereriti, yellowed, torn at the edges, signed Bernard Stonehill. "You owe a life," she said. "I've come to collect." In the hall, Kevin stood alone. He didn't eavesdrop, he didn't need to. The manor spoke for its residents. Old floors told stories with each creak. Fireplaces whispered to the smoke. And somewhere, between breath and memory, a decision had already been made. Someone, tonight, had decided that Bernard Stonehill would not wake up tomorrow. Kevin exhaled slowly and whispered, "And if I were you, I'd make sure I wasn't the second one to try." The last whisper. The snow had stopped. Outside, the world lay frozen in a perfect hush, like God had pressed pause just before something terrible. The trees stood still. No wind, no birds, only cold and expectation. Inside the study, Bernard Stonehill sat alone. The fire burned low, throwing restless shadows across the bookshelves and mahogany-paneled walls. The flames didn't warm him. They never had. Not in years. He sat in his old leather chair, the one no one else dared touch, with a blanket over his knees and a glass of brandy in his hand. The glass was full. The bottle next to him was not. He didn't drink yet. He was waiting. The room was locked. He had done so himself, turning the heavy brass key, then slipping it into the drawer beside him. Not because he feared anyone entering, but because this moment was his. The study smelled of dust, cedar, and old paper. The air was thick, like the breath of memories that refused to die. Bernard looked toward the painting above the fireplace, his own portrait, painted decades ago. He had been young then, arrogant, unstoppable. He hated that version of himself, but he hated the version now more. "So," he said aloud, to no one, "you've all come." He chuckled, the sound dry, rasping, like sheep returning to a slaughterhouse. He swirled the brandy, stared into its amber depths. "I wonder which one of you has the spine." He coughed, deep, cracked. Arthur? Too weak. Always waiting for someone else to decide. Mason? Clever, but spineless when it matters. Derek? Maybe. The boy has pain, but not enough hate. He leaned back, the leather creaking like bones. Henry? You're the wild card. Maybe I should have drowned you when I had the chance. His eyes drifted to the desk, where 2 wills sat. One signed, one not. And beside them, a revolver, unloaded. He didn't need it. Not tonight. The fire popped loudly. A log shifted. Bernard blinked slowly. He didn't fear death. He feared dying unseen, unremembered, unfeared. He reached for the pen beside the unsigned will, then stopped, and instead, with the last of his breath, he whispered to the flames, "One of you will do it. And when you do, I hope it hurts." He closed his eyes, and for a moment, everything was still. Outside the study, down the hall, a floorboard creaked. Software. Careful. Almost loving. The door remained locked, but not for long.